Hey everybody, and welcome to Geek Freaks. I am Frank, and I'm with Jonathan.
Hey yo.
And today, first of all, we're not doing the stream because we're trying out a new camera. Because I realized that the camera on my phone is better than the pretty expensive webcam I bought.
Yeah.
So we're investing in a new camera here pretty soon. But for now, we're gonna try out the phone, which means no stream because we're still trying something new. But today is our very first comic book club. Really excited about that. What that means is we're gonna be going over a staple comic in comic book history. Today's is Watchmen, which arguably might be the biggest staple there is. And we'll review kind of a little bit behind the, like who the writers are and stuff like that. Then we'll just break down the big story, our thoughts on the story, and then we'll talk about any other medium. This one has a lot of extra mediums, so I want to make sure to go into that. And then we have some news at the end. So nice. I didn't want to do the news first because I thought, you know what? People are going to be Watchmen hyped because today that we're recording this, the new series is starting. It's Watchmen series. So people are going to be fired up for that. Is there anything you have any questions about Watchmen before we get started or anything like that?
Nope, I'm stoked.
All right, full stoked. Here we go. So here's our brand new comic book club, Watchmen. We're starting off with the writers, or the writer is Alan Moore. He's also known for doing League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, V for Vendetta, and Batman the Killing Joke. There's a few other ones.
The comic series of those?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
But those are like, I mean, Batman the Killing Joke is, when we were picking our things, I was like, okay, one of you guys need to do this, and you need to do it right because it's so important. So, I mean, that's pretty crazy right there. It's kind of what I would argue the new Joker movie might be leaning into.
Yeah.
So, if you're kind of wondering.
And I really liked the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen movie, so I think that'd be a good series to read too.
Yeah, I liked the movie, but I think I have to read it now because knowing that Alan Moore made it after reading Watchmen, I think I have to read that and see how much better it actually is.
A lot more depth to it than the show, I'm sure.
Yeah. Because that's okay, so just to give everybody references, you've only watched the movie. How many times have you watched the movie before?
I think twice.
Twice.
Yeah.
I've only seen it once, and it was in 2009 when I saw it in the theaters. And I remember walking out like, yeah, that was pretty cool. It was way too long. I don't know what the cartoon parts were about.
Yeah.
There's like cartoon parts in there. I don't know if you remember that part.
I don't remember most of the movie. I remember the blue guy walking around naked.
That's what everybody, there's a lot of dong in it. Yeah. So everybody walks away with that. It's Dr. Manhattan. So I just knew that this was important. And I remember after that movie, I ended up picking up a couple copies I got off of like eBay or something like that.
Yeah.
I didn't really get into it. Then I bought this maybe a year ago. I'm going to show it for the cameras. This is the paperback that came out a couple years ago. Now there's a brand new one, even newer than this. This is $20 US, and you can get it. I think I bought it for sale for $10. So that's what we're going to be going off of is this one here, and that's the complete collection there. So Alan Moore's the one's the writer. The artist is Dave Gibbons. He's done so many books, but he's known for Judge Dredd, Green Lantern 2. He's worked on the Hellblazer comics. Is something that we've also been talking about reading. Colorist is John Higgins. Also Judge Dredd, Batman the Killing Joke, and Jonah Hex. Jonah Hex is one of those I really feel like I should be reading. I think it would be right up my alley. Comic books and Western. It's perfect. Published by DC Comics in 86 to 87 as a 12-issue run. And I'm just going to read the synopsis. So this is just a real brief kind of like, what is Watchmen? Watchmen depicts an alternate universe or history where superheroes emerged in the 40s and the 60s, and their presence changed how the history of the United States. We ended up winning the Vietnam War, and Watergate never was exposed. So Nixon was able to continue being president. They actually changed it so he was president 5 times in a row.
Wow.
Yeah. In 85, the country is edging towards World War III with the Soviet Union. Freelance costume vigilantes have been outlawed, and most former superheroes are in retirement or working for the government. The story focuses on the personal development and moral struggles of the protagonists as they investigate a murder of a government-sponsored superhero that pulls them out of retirement. So that's the idea, is we're watching these guys that have already been retired. Some of them have been around, like Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan's been around before. Yeah. And they're kind of being pulled back in to investigate why the comedian, which is the guy that died, why he had died, and who killed him, how he was murdered, and stuff like that. It was clearly a murder. Some special notes on this. This comic book is a 9-panel on the YouTube channel. If YouTube doesn't hate me and bans us for doing it, they always do. It's generally a 9-panel layout, which at the time it's kind of different because a lot of times you do these big flashy panels and stuff like that, especially nowadays. Comic books are that way a lot.
Yeah.
This was a 9-panel format, and whenever it wasn't 9 panels, they were still staying within the format.
Yeah.
You would just use 3 instead of
combine 2 or 3.
It makes it for a much more of a novel-like read instead of a comic book read. Matter of fact, I have this noted too. It received so many acclaims and stuff like that from comic fans and mainstream press. Watchmen was recognized in Time's list of the top 100 novels in the English language since 1923.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's pretty amazing. In retrospect, retrospective review, the BBC's Nicholas Barber described it as the moment comic books grew up. So that's why we wanted to make sure we added this one in, because this is when
that's the tipping point of us as kids reading comic books. Now we're adults and we're publishing adult comic books, more mature, reads.
This was the comic book. They existed beforehand, but they just weren't really received.
Yeah.
This is the first time it was received as like, holy cow, this is an amazing story. It's in this comic book medium, but that doesn't mean that's for kids.
Yeah.
It's just how we're telling our story. And this could not be told without a comic book. It's just the visuals behind it. Watching Dr. Manhattan form his castle on Mars and stuff like that. You have to see that. You just can't read it.
That's cool. So
that's why we want to make sure that this is one of the staples we review, because it's why we can review the rest, essentially. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's why it's okay for, in most people's eyes, for adults to read comic books. So that's this one right here. It has, it's famous for its smiley face with a stain on it. The other main comic book combined together will always have that on front of it. This one's just in the middle. It has a smiley face with a blood stain on it. The smiley face was always worn by the comedian. Mm-hmm. The blood stain is from when he died in the opening scene. Throughout, it's used as a symbol of your happy-go-lucky comic book heroes, your superheroes, having or not being perfect.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the stain on humanity,
Yeah.
It's like the truth behind superheroes.
A false smile, like just covering up the darkness that's going on in the background kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah.
It also looks like a old Walmart logo.
It does, yeah.
It's funny.
I think Walmart was big Watchmen fans.
Right.
That's what happened. In between the chapters, there's so much backstory behind this. Now, of course, I just read this, and then my last 2 weeks have been just Watchmen brain. So it's a lot for me to process in 2 weeks. There are fans, like I am fans of Game of Thrones. Mm-hmm. There are fans of this that can tell you the different little details. It's so funny that our first comic book review is like one of the deepest comic books that really we should be doing a podcast about, not just this episode.
So there must be Watchmen conventions and stuff, right?
There has to be.
Groups of, I'd imagine, because like you're saying, it's such a pivotal and well received comic that it'd be kind of cool to see.
And beyond just the story itself, in between each chapter, there are fake files, like Rorschach's files, and there are there's a book within this book. There's actually multiple of them. There's one of them. It's called Under the Hood. That the first Night Owl, which you could assume is their very nice version of Batman. Mm-hmm. The first version of him ended up making a book about what it's like to be a superhero, and he kind of busted out a lot of the truths behind all the all the superheroes, and he was shunned by a lot of people because of it. But those pages, those inserts are throughout the book. And then one thing that I don't actually like is there's this comic book called The Tales of the Black Dread. I have, let me see. The Black Freighter, which is this old pirate comic book that's within these comic books, because at this time, there are no superhero comic books because those are in real life. So all the comic books are about pirates.
Okay. And, in their world. What kids are reading is not about the heroes that are real to them. It's about pirates. It's more fictional for them. Yeah.
So, so this whole time, you within the pages, you're getting also this other comic book story about this captain and him. I'll go over the quick story about that at the end. But essentially,
it kind of mirrors what they're talking about. It's
mirroring the I would say villain, if you want to pick an antagonist. We'll go with the antagonist of the story.
Okay.
So it is kind of setting up why he's doing what he's doing. Mm-hmm. But generally, I think it slows actually the whole thing down. And in the movie, we'll talk about the movie briefly at the end. It ruins the movie to me.
Really?
I think if they were to take that out, and I watched the ultimate cut, which is 210 minutes. It's a long cut. But, I mean, those scenes come at moments when you want to keep the intensity high. Mm-hmm. Then it's cartoon now. And it's just, they use cartoon because in here it's a different format, different, whatever. So they do change up quite a bit with that. And then also the last thing we want to note about how the comic book is before we get into the story, is it jumps around a lot in time, because I have a feeling it's because you're reading it like Dr. Manhattan would read it, who sees through time.
Yeah.
So Dr. Manhattan will say words like, it is 1948, I'm with the comedian and we're watching whatever. It is 1983, I'm with Lori, and because he's seeing at all points.
Yeah.
And it gets so amazing. This. So when you're done reading this, you sit back in your chair and holy shit, that was a good movie, or that was a good book.
Yeah.
And when you're reading his lines specifically, it's he's what is one of the things he says? He says something like, "Oh, I'm telling Lori that you're here, Rorschach." And he's talking to Lori while he's saying that, "I'm telling her in 2 minutes that you're going to be here." And then you see the other part of the conversation where he said the same thing over again, but it makes sense now in both senses because he's telling both people like, oh, don't worry, you're here.
Yeah.
It's just nuts.
He's literally being in two places at the same time.
Exactly. At two different times.
Oh, yeah.
So he's saying the same thing for two different people at 2 minutes apart.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I gotcha. He's communicating to himself through time, pretty much. Like he's letting him. Yeah. I get
it's really hard. Yeah.
It's a mind trick, but that's cool.
So a lot of times, like especially Lori lives with him, so she sees it a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of times you're in the room with him and you're having a conversation with him, but he's having a conversation with two different people, and they're not at the same time, essentially. So it gets complicated.
I'm trying to think of where else we've seen that, but I can't think of.
No, and what's tricky is if you've seen it, it's because they copied Watchmen.
Yeah.
Because this came out in 86, 87. So a lot of that stuff comes from here. A lot of the stuff we watch today. Some of the other sequels and other media as we get from this is we have the Zack Snyder film that came out in 2009 that we've talked about a lot.
Yeah.
Zack Snyder, he later on went to go do Justice League and Batman vs. Superman and all those train wrecks.
Yeah.
So, this, I think, actually was better than Justice League. I think there actually is a little bit more style to it. I do like how they use slow motion. We'll get into all that later on. There was a Warner Brothers published motion comics that animated the original comic book. So they actually took the panels out of the comic book and animated them. It's amazing and it's free on YouTube.
Really?
Yeah, I was watching it all morning. It's really neat. And the only problem is the voice actors. I think they use like one or two voice actors for everything.
Yeah.
So like they used this guy's voice for Lori.
So all very similar and hard to fall into
and then
the
like
characters.
some of the black characters, they ended up like overdoing the voices where like, you guys didn't need to do that. You know what I'm saying? That was made in 2009 and sometimes it sounds like it was made in the 80s with the book. And then they published a book called Before Watchmen, which is a prequel miniseries back in 2012. And then we have Doomsday Clock, which we've talked about in the past. That is a 12 issues limited series. It's a sequel to the original series that premiered in 2017. And that one doesn't have Alan Moore or Gibson involved, but it is supposed to be tying in Watchmen into the Batman and Superman universes and stuff like that. So it's a way to kind of bring everything in. And then lastly, we have the television adaptation, which is also a sequel. And that's so I want to make sure everybody understands this. That is a sequel to the comic book, not to the movie.
Oh, okay.
Because the endings are different. So there is a squid, that's in the series. That's what's in the comic book too. It's not some bomb that goes off. Some of our big characters that we have in this is Rorschach. He's Walter Joseph Kovac. I'll be referring to him as I go over the story as Rorschach. He's a very noir detective type character that has a mask on that's constantly changing its shape like a Rorschach test.
Yeah.
He is a messed up individual and he's journaling the whole time. He's actually like, I heard somebody because I've been doing a lot of research on this as well. Somebody described it very well as he's what Batman would be in real life, because a person who can go out every night and beat up thugs and do all this research constantly thinking like that, they wouldn't be a billionaire with a sane mind during the day. No, they would just be like
a nut job during the day too.
Exactly.
Just trying to get through the sunlight so they can get back into their darkness.
And during the day when he's Walter, he's this guy who's like carrying around one of those like the end is nigh signs everywhere. So you always see him in the background while other people are talking, because that's how he's spying during the day. Because he's just like this like crazy
like
nut
homeless.
job.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Next, we have Silk Spectre 2, which is Lori. She takes after her mom, who was Silk Spectre 1. She is a superhero, but doesn't want to be a superhero. And when I talk about her, we'll just be calling her Lori. We have Night Owl 2, which is, again, a sequel to Night Owl. He is Daniel Drydenberg, but I'll be calling him Dan. We have Osmodeus. Adrian Veidt is his real name. We'll be calling him Ozzy. He is... So, like, Night Owl, just real quick, he's like Batman like you would expect with the cowl and everything like that.
Yeah.
Right? He has a cool tech because he was just rich.
Yeah.
He just got a funny backstory. He's like, I'm rich and I liked the first Night Owl. So I asked him, okay, can I use your stuff? Essentially. And he became the new Night Owl. Osmodeus was this guy who's believed to be the smartest man on Earth. And he like really likes Egyptian art style. So everything he does is like Egyptian art style. And he models his life after Alexander the Great.
Okay.
Two more. We have the comedian. He's Edward Blake. He is basically the Punisher and Wolverine mixed in one, if I were to pick somebody.
Nice.
With just like ramped up to rated R. So he's done so many atrocious things. I believe the reason he's the comedian is because he's the only one that kind of sees life as it is. Like, we're all screwed once the nukes go off anyways. So I think he thinks life is a joke.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with that. Kind of like Joker, the new Joker movie, that kind of thing.
Yeah, a little bit crazy, but just hanging on enough to...
Yeah, and Rorschach actually admires that in Blake, is the fact that he sees life for what it is and won't be soft. Like everybody around him is soft, and Rorschach takes
Isn't
that.
trying to sugarcoat the world around him.
Yeah, so although he dies in the first scene, he is referenced throughout the entire comic book because he's the inciting incident for this.
Yeah, in the movie, it was all about flashbacks with him too.
And in the movie, he's played by was it Jeffrey D. Morgan?
Yeah,
Negan.
Yeah,
and which was some excellent casting. Last person I want to make sure we introduce is Dr. Manhattan. He started out as Dr. John Osterman, and I'll be referring to him as just Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
An important note is he is. I'm gonna double check my brain here. Yes, he's the only one with superpowers.
Okay. Oh, so all these other heroes, I didn't realize that.
That's something that the movie doesn't do.
Huh.
He's the only one that's not a guy that's just wearing a cape and running around fighting people all day.
So what's Rorschach's mask about?
That's
like witchcraft
that's not in the movie as well. No, that mask is actually, so when Manhattan became big, he started making a lot of tech. So everybody's driving around in electric cars and stuff like that. That mask is made from a dress that they made like with like mixing up shapes, and it was designed by him.
Oh, okay.
So it's like Manhattan magic essentially.
It's just to be a unique style dress, but everybody.
The lady didn't like it, and so and then the lady was killed later on. Rorschach was a dress deliverer at the time, ended up taking the dress, stealing it, and like making his mask out of it.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, nobody here. Night Owl's rich. Silk Spectre just trained really hard. Osmodeus is the smartest man alive, but that's it. And we find out that even that's not enough sometimes. He is super fast, which comes in important later on. So maybe he does consider to have superpowers. But yeah, the comedian, he's just got a lot of guns.
Yeah, in the movie, it seemed like he had super strength too, but maybe it's just brute strength.
All of them in the movie seem like they have super strength.
Yeah.
When you watch it, it opens up after comedian dies, and then we see we'll go over the storyline, but Rorschach gets into his apartment. It's all like way overpowered. Like he's able to jump and like barely lean on stuff, and he like slides down buildings sometimes. So like, whoa, no, dude, you're just a dude.
Yeah,
you are the fittest.
Not Spider-Man, but
right. He even like kind of makes fun of like Dan in the movie is kind of fit and cut a little bit. When in the comic book he's got a pudge because he's retired, and so he's got this little pudge, and then he kind of puts the suit back on and like, oh, here we go,
like Incredibles.
Yeah,
with the head squeezed
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, exactly. So that's basically what we're looking at, guys, for Watchmen. I'm going to go ahead and go into the story now. There's going to be a lot of talking. I have some checkpoints so I can narrow it down a little bit. Interrupt if you have any questions or any insights, okay?
Will do.
And I bought some music so we could put underneath this, so it might be like cool story time.
Suave.
We'll see how it goes.
I like it.
All right, here we go. Watchmen. Chapter 1. We start with the comedian being killed. He's thrown out of his apartment. Somebody murdered the comedian. Yeah. Rorschach goes in afterwards and inspects what had happened. Detectives come by. They're like, oh, it's no big deal. Yeah, whatever. And that's where Rorschach finds out that this was the comedian, because originally it was just some old man that died. We learn that Rorschach is keeping a journal, and that's where he writes down. He's kind of like the narrator for the entire story as well through his journal.
Yeah.
Two things you note from the journal is that we learn that he is a nut job. I mean, he's very not PC in everything he thinks. So when he's really against prostitution, and we find out later on it's because his mom was a prostitute and stuff like that. So, and there's just real quick spoilers first, second, super mature content. Content. So be aware of that. The future comic books when we're reviewing Batman stuff, it won't be this bad. Then we go into Rorschach starts to question all the other heroes that we have at play still alive. So he goes to Dan, and he's talking to Dan. He talks to Ozzy at one point, and Ozzy at this point we learn is like wealthy, and he learned to kind of quit before this Keene Act kicked in. This Keene Act came in, and it made it outlawed to be a superhero. So the only ones that were allowed was the comedian, because he worked for the government, and Manhattan, because he was also working for the government.
Okay.
So Ozzy quit it a little bit early, and then he started selling action figures. So he got rich and everything like that.
Real quick, was there a reason why Rorschach started questioning other heroes? Was there some kind of connection that he thinks? Good point. See, in the fine details, I have all kind of stuff, but I want to make sure to kind of be broad, so that's good. Yeah.
The reason he's doing that is because he thinks somebody's going around trying to kill heroes.
Oh, okay. He thinks it's the beginning of a series of hero deaths.
Right.
Gotcha.
So that's what's starting him off. So he goes there. So he talks to, and then we see, Dan's this guy who's retired, and he goes and he hangs out with the old night out every night, Hollis, which is just the sweetest thing. You have this like old man who's telling stories from like the 40s when he was, back in my day, but he's a real nice guy. Then you got this guy 20 years later on that was doing it, and he's also retired, but he's like too young to be retired still. So it's just this really kind of cute thing where they visit every Sunday,
Yeah.
So we have that. Then we see Manhattan and Laurie, they're working for the government. Mm-hmm. So they work at the Rockefeller Institute, and Manhattan's really the guy that's like doing all the work because they're trying to like develop some stuff. Mm-hmm. And she's allowed to live there, but her job, we learn through context, is to keep him calm because he is a nuclear bomb.
She's like his handler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like just keep that heart rate down because he could kill everybody just by thinking it.
Yeah. Just by getting nervous or something.
And so there's a couple things going on in the background here while we're talking. I won't be going into too much. Mm-hmm. First off, there's a lot of side characters. I won't be talking about the comic book within a comic book. Mm-hmm. We won't be talking about that whole newsstand. There's all kinds of side stuff, which matters towards the end, but generally is just kind of building up New York.
Yeah.
Secondly, there's a war that's approaching between the U.S. and Russia. It's World War III, and everybody's got nuclear bombs. And they project that essentially we'll lose the East Coast and we'll just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of what Nixon in his 5th term is now looking at. And like, okay, that's what we have.
Yeah.
So just kind of keep that in mind. Dr. Manhattan's the reason the Russians haven't attacked yet because he can go in and just delete Russia.
Okay.
So he's our nuclear answer, you know? Okay. And so when he's going around, we see that Laurie and Manhattan are sitting there working. Rorschach's kind of bugging them a little bit, Laurie specifically, because he's trying to defend the comedian. And we learn that Laurie's mother was almost raped by the comedian. So she doesn't want anything to do with, if he's dead, good.
Yeah.
Be gone. And then Manhattan's like, oh, you're bugging Laurie. And Manhattan doesn't quite understand emotions right now.
Yeah. So
he just kind of can get, I noticed that she's upset. He's not getting the actual point of the story. So he zaps him gone. He's outside the facility.
Yeah.
And then we see that Laurie and Manhattan, Laurie's complaining to Manhattan. She feels cooped up all the time and asks if, why don't we go have dinner with Dan? And he's like, well, why don't you go and have dinner with Dan? And then what's cool is the expression they put on his face is it's like he's smiling at that moment. And so after I read this and then I was watching the motion comic book, they made sure to show that smile really clearly. Mm-hmm. And it's because I think he sees in the future that her and Dan are going to get together. So he's like, this is the future of a good relationship.
That's cool.
He's also upset about it. Yeah. It's so funny that he can see through when he's happy about it and when he's upset about it.
Yeah, because he exists in all time, right?
Yeah.
He's like omnipotent.
Yeah, so later on we'll talk about, I'll just kind of drop it in real quick. He says, we're going to talk, and in about 2 minutes you're going to tell me that you're sleeping with Dan. I'm going to be upset about it. He's like, how did you know? How would you know? How would you be upset about it? And then eventually as 2 minutes go on, she says, and he's like, you're sleeping with Dan? And it's like, what the hell? This book is so good.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So then Laurie and Dan, they go out on this date and they talk about the Keene Act and the good old days. So it's kind of reminiscing about the good old days. And you see that there's a good budding relationship there.
Yeah.
The next chapter, there's 2 major things that are going on. We'll start with Laurie. She's going to go visit her mom. And and everybody else is going to the funeral of the comedian. She didn't want to go to the funeral because, of course, she's upset about the attempted rape.
Yeah.
While with the mom, though, we learn that she looks at history a little differently because she was the one that attempted to rape. You assume that she was very upset about this whole thing.
Yeah.
But she's kind of like, people are flawed,
you
know? And
I remember that part in the movie, too. Yeah. It's like, you know what? The world is crazy. Other than that one thing, he's a pretty good guy.
Well, even that she looks at the comedian almost like he didn't think in black and white. He thought in grays. And that's just how life is. Life is grays. Yeah. And so her character, one thing I remember when I watched the movie and then reading this is I want a whole series about the Minutemen, which is the older family, you know?
Yeah.
And the comedian was one of them that was like in both groups. So he's a very interesting character in that sense. And then we learned in the funeral, each member of the main cast is kind of having flashbacks of when they were working with the comedian and some of the atrocities that he had committed. So I'll just go over real quick what these were. Osmodeus was real easy. Ozzy's was real easy. They tried to form the group again in the 60s. And the comedian got mad at everybody else. It's a joke. All you guys are jokes. You think you're going to be able to stop what's coming. You can't. And there's a really cool scene where there's like this map of like, we have to worry about hate crimes and we have to worry about this. And he just lights it up. He's like, doesn't matter because when the nukes come, it's all gone.
Yeah.
So you guys are silly to think that you're big enough or that the problems are small enough for you to be able to handle.
Yeah.
And then he walks out. That scene, you don't realize how important it is until after you're done with the comic book. But that scene's really important. And so that's what Ozzy's thinking about. Manhattan's thinking about the time when him and a comedian were sitting there winning the Vietnam War for the U.S., which is not how it went in history, right? Yeah, we didn't win the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
But this one they did.
Oh, and there's, okay,
yeah. So that's one thing that's interesting. In the movie, there's 51 stars on all the flags because we won Vietnam and then we made it a state. Yeah. So it shows that like they're just zapping through people. A lot of the Vietnamese surrendered in that war because they thought that Manhattan was a god. And so they were like, well, we're going to listen to whatever the god says. The atrocity that happens is they're drinking at a bar afterwards while fireworks are going off. And a woman comes in, she's pregnant with a comedian's son or child. And then he says, I'm done with this country. I'm out. I don't care what you think. She slashes him on the face and he guns her down.
Oh, wow.
And it's so heart-wrenching because right away, Manhattan's like, what are you doing? You gunned her down. And he's like, yeah, you watched me do it. And you could have turned my gun to steam. You could have, done this and that, and you didn't.
You knew your whole life this moment was going to happen. Yeah. You didn't turn me away or something like that.
Exactly. And then he says, it's because you don't care about us humans. Yeah. You don't look at us. You are detached from us more and more every day. And God help us when you become fully detached.
Yeah.
It's like, damn, this book is so freaking good. And it's a comic book. I love it. And then Dan's reference back is when there's so many, I was almost thinking like I should just make a list of one-liners because there's so many good one-liners. But anyways, he's looking back to this one time when there's this big riot and him and comedian were supposed to be quelling the riot. Dan's trying to keep things level-headed because that's how Dan is. But the comedian finally just gets down there with a gun and just starts hitting people with the butt of his gun. Yeah. Starts beating up the writers. He's got this like tear gas. He's just launching it at people and stuff like that. He's just shooting down people. And then Night Owl's like, Dan's like, what happened to us? What's going on? And he says, what happened to the American dream? He's like, what are you talking about? This is the American dream. We're living it. Enjoy it because it's almost gone. And stuff like that. So that kind of that's what that whole funeral scene is about. Is kind of showing their relationship to the comedian and also building up the comedian because we don't get him in present tense.
Yeah.
So that tells you who the character is. Pretty messed up character that I really want to read a lot more about.
Right.
Yeah. And then right after this, we got Rorschach. He notices that Moloch, which is one of their arch nemesis, is like back in the day, he was at the funeral. So then he follows him back to his apartment, starts questioning him. And he reveals that the comedian actually visited him back in the a while ago and was like falling apart, saying like, "Oh, we're all screwed," yada yada yada. Real weird thing, like crying at the foot of his bed and then walked away. So he's like, something's up, and so that's why he went to go visit him. And he also reveals that the comedian kept talking about this island full of artists and scientists and stuff like that. There's this weird island going on. So the comedian obviously knew something that everybody else didn't know.
Yeah.
And then Rorschach leaves him because he finds out the Moloch has cancer. So chapter 3. We see that Manhattan so Laurie and Manhattan's relationship's, of course, on the strain because of the situation where he's so much more advanced than she is.
Yeah.
He lost his last wife because she was aging, he wouldn't age, and eventually they grew apart.
Didn't she get cancer because of his radiation?
Yeah, it's coming up.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, that gets deep. That gets crazy. Yeah. So this is one of the moments that things really fall apart. Manhattan and Laurie are in bed together, and then we realize it's two Manhattans that are in bed with him. And then we realize when she's frustrated, there's two of them. Neither of those are the Manhattan that's really paying attention. He's working out in the lab because he's got to get stuff done.
Yeah.
So he's just sending basically clones in. He's like, I was focusing on you, I promise. Bullshit. You were in the lab. You were focusing on the lab. So Laurie's upset.
At the same time, though, he's so powerful. I'm sure his mind can process more than ours, so he can be fully focused as much as we can in multiple places at the same time.
That's one of the hard things, too. Yeah, because we're reading this. I think we see time a lot like Manhattan does, but we're humans like Laurie.
Yeah.
Look at the situation, so it boggles us the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, by the way, guys, you might hear papers rustling in the background. Yeah. That's because there's just a lot of them.
That's authentic hands-on notes.
Yeah. I'm going to scan these and actually put them up for our patrons because there's a lot of details that I'm skipping.
Might as well.
So Laurie gets upset and she says, I'm leaving you to Manhattan. And she goes and sees Dan. After this, so she's going to go stay with Dan, and basically that's what's going to end up happening is she's going to end up staying with Dan.
Yeah.
And Manhattan has an interview that evening. So he's going to go on TV and kind of like bring peace to everybody because the tension's high with the war coming up. So like, well, let's talk to the deterrent himself. You know, It's like if we could sit down and talk to the nukes, and the nukes be like, don't worry, I got this, guys.
Yeah.
Essentially what's going to happen. During this, a reporter comes up and says, hey, so, your past partner has cancer. Your ex-wife has cancer. This guy, that guy, this guy, they all got cancer. They were ever around you. Are you giving people cancer? And then like all of a sudden the question starts to bubble up and stuff like that. And he gets frustrated. And one of the most awe-inspiring moments, he's like, stop asking me questions. He freaks out and doesn't zap himself out. He zaps everybody in the studio out. Audience, cameraman, everybody. So it's him by himself. And then he's just like, all right, I'm out. So he goes to Mars. So he goes to Arizona, grabs a picture, then he goes to Mars. And there he's at peace and nobody's going to bug him and stuff like that. Chapter 4, and there's 12 chapters, so we're moving along pretty good here. This is the first time we see how Manhattan thinks in fourth dimensions, and it's basically the Manhattan chapter. Each one of these guys get moments where we kind of see how who they are.
Yeah.
Manhattan, he started off as a watchmaker for his father. His dad wanted him to get into atomic science.
So he was normal. He was a regular person. I didn't realize that. I thought he was just a entity, like an alien or a god or something like that.
Yeah, he's the only one that he got it like classic DC superheroes. You're either an alien or it's a freak accident. Yeah, that's the two different DC superheroes.
Gotcha. So he got bit by a spider.
So the spider came along like the Marvel hero. Janie and him, which is his first wife, met while they were scientists together. He had an accident. And in this accident, it ended up tearing him into pieces. He was in like this, like...
It was deatomized, whatever?
In this chamber that they were developing, and it just tore him to pieces. So as time goes on, he slowly starts to learn how to rebuild himself. And it's crazy because at first it's just his nervous system like screaming at people, and then he just disappears like he's a ghost haunting the place. Yeah. And it's him trying to figure out how to build himself again.
Yeah. His energy trying to like reform into a body.
Right. So eventually he does, and he comes back. He doesn't age now. And he eventually loses Janie to this because she's aging, and he sees the future, and he knows that at one of these meetings, Lori's there, and she's like this young, cute little thing, and he smiles at her, and it's because he knows what's going to happen. He knows that him and Janie are going to get, or him and Lori are going to get together. Yeah. Janie freaks out about this. And then we see that, we learned that the Vietnamese surrendered to him because he thought he was God. And then we learned that him and Comedian are the only ones that were exempt for the Keene Act. While there, it's amazing because we're jumping around the whole time, back and forth from moments when he's like, I'm holding this picture now, and I'm here, and I'm there. So we're really reading this through his point of view. At the end, he ends up creating a fortress out of the sand. So he ends up creating this giant glass fortress that runs like a clock does, like the watches he used to make with his dad. So it's this giant fortress, and that's basically just an all Manhattan chapter. In chapter 5 now, we see Rorschach's interrogating Moloch at his apartment again. He thinks that Moloch shared this list of cancer patients, like he leaked it to the press. Lori moves in with Dan Foley now because the government won't pay for her apartment anymore now that Manhattan's gone. The government's worried now that Manhattan's gone, and her one job is to keep him under control.
How long was he gone for?
Now that I don't know how long it's been. It's been like a couple of days. Oh, okay. But everybody's worried.
Yeah. It's like they don't have their defense system anymore all of a sudden.
Exactly. And right away, Russia's like moving into Afghanistan. Yeah. And right away, Russia starts going. And so then some of the side character stuff that I'm not reading here is this like newspaper. He sells newspapers on the corner. Very cool character, to be honest with you. Him and this kid that's reading a comic book the whole time. And through him, he's reading the newspapers that are coming out, like the rising tension in the war. And he's kind of like, and at one point, it's a beautiful moment. There's a lot of moments that are like, man, this is a beautiful moment, where he's reading like World War III is here. And his kid keeps coming to borrow the comic book, read it by his newsstand, and put it back so he can sell it. He's like, why don't you just keep it, kid? Like, we don't have any much time.
It doesn't matter anyways.
Yeah. That's crazy. And the movie did a really good job because when things blow up, him and the kid end up hugging while just it destroys him. God, it's such a good... Anyways, so... then we see over in Ozzy's corporation, he's in the corporation or whatever, and he's walking down the stairs with his secretary. An assassin comes in, attempts to shoot him, ends up hitting the secretary instead, but there was an assassination attempt on Ozzy. So somebody is going around trying to kill all the superheroes, right? And then we find out when Rorschach comes in to try to interrogate Moloch, somebody had shot him in the head and was framing Rorschach. He puts up a good fight, but eventually is captured by the cops and brought to jail.
Dang.
Yeah. He's being tested by a psychologist once he's in jail. We learn about his sex worker mother who would eventually be abusive to him and stuff like that because he like, oh, what's going on in there? Like, oh, no, and getting beaten. It's very sad. It's unsafe for him in prison because he put a lot of the guys there. Him and Night Owl used to be partners back in the day, worked together really tight, and they used to just clean up the streets quite a bit. Yeah. That was before he started to kind of lose it a little bit. He made the transition into Rorschach one night when, God, this is such a sad story, but he was investigating this missing girl. He goes to this apartment or this little house or whatever, and he finds her clothes are in like the stove, but like when you warm the house with the stove, you know? Yeah. And then he realizes the dogs are chewing on a bone outside, and it's the girl's bones. And this is something that changed from the comic book in the movie. So in the comic book, the guy comes in. He waits for the guy. The guy comes in. He ends up killing the dogs and like throwing. I think they throw the dogs at him. Maybe that's just in the movie. He ends up chaining the guy to the house and gives him a saw. And he says, "You're not gonna have enough time to cut the saw or cut the handcuffs. You got to cut your arms." And he burns the house down and kills the guy. Nice. And it's just and so he says, "From that day, I was no longer Walter or whatever. I was Rorschach." Yeah. So it messed him up.
Man.
Yeah. Lori now lives with Dan, and she's exploring the Owl Cave. I call it Owl Cave because it's essentially Bat Cave, but owls now.
Yeah.
And they're talking a lot and stuff like that. Dan doubts that Rorschach is actually a murderer because they used to work together, so he still has friendship with him. And as time goes on, Lori and Dan end up hooking up, but he can't get up. Like he can't get hard at all. So he's just a wimp. So, they decide to suit up and take the ship out, which is called Archie, which is short for Archimedes, which is Merlin's owl. So that's where he gets the name. While out, they end up saving people that are in a burning building. It's a really cool scene where we actually see like the Maximum Night Owl and how that works, and Lori, how they work together, stuff like that. Yeah. The rush is invigorating, and then they finally, brown chicken, brown cow on the ship. So
nice.
They're all good to go. All right. Chapter 8. Try to keep it a little PG so that the kids can listen, Chapter 8. Dan and Lori continue. So after at the end of this, I'm sorry, Dan says, if it's bad to have Rorschach rot in jail, we're going to go save him. Yeah. So they're going to do a jailbreak. Nice. Chapter 8, we start with they were continuing to plan the jailbreak. And then there's these gangsters that are going to try to kill Rorschach in jail. A detective approaches Dan and is asking questions about the fire rescue and the comedian. People are starting to put things together. We also so throughout the comic book, we get little snippets of what's going on the island, and they're sitting there designing this, they think it's movie effects, like this big squid monster for this movie and stuff like that. So we're sitting there. One of the guys that are designing things is the writer of the comic book that we see within there too, the Tales of the Black Freighter. So that's just a little side thing I think is important that we do mention at some point. Night Owl and Lori, they end up breaching the prison, and let's see. Yeah, they end up breaching the prison and they break him out essentially, and it's this awesome, harrowing, breakout. But when I watched the movie last night, so I was like, I'm fresh on the movie too. Actually, it was like, oh man, I might be thinking of the movie too much now because I just watched it last night after reading this for a couple weeks. But in the book, it's something that people complain about a lot. Is in the book, it was like, let's get him in, we barely got him, let's get out, we're safe. In the movie, it's like, you guys are badass superheroes. They're all like Batman right now. You guys are doing cool tricks, but you're not heroes. You're not actually super. You're just guys that wear costumes. So
you're firefighters with a different purpose.
Exactly. So they kind of make them too powerful in the movie scene. So you know, kind of got to scale that back a little bit. When they finally get back and they got Rorschach and like that, Manhattan projects himself there and says, "Hey, I need to take Lori away." Lori agrees, and so Lori's now going to be on Mars with him for a while. And the police charge into Dan's apartment, and then Dan and Rorschach escape on Archie. So now they're wanted. And the public learns that this is so sad. Oh God, another good moment. The public learns that Night Owl broke in and got Rorschach. Some of the thugs are upset, and they said, "Oh, I think Night Owl wrote that book, didn't he? Yeah, he lives down there. He's over there. He's a mechanic now." They break into the old Night Owl's apartment, the old man, and beat him to death.
Wow, that's messed up.
With his statue of his
trophy or something
for being a good citizen or whatever.
Wow,
they kill him with it. Oh, it was so heartbreaking.
That sucks.
Yeah,
that's why you can't fall in love with anybody, especially if you're here.
Yeah, really, Game of Thrones to me.
Yeah.
Okay, chapter 9, which I feel like is the pinnacle of this entire book. So, in chapter 9, it's just Lori and Manhattan on Mars the entire time, and this is peak mind messing with. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of give you an idea, but I was like, I'm putting these checks, and then this one I just said all of this needs to be talked about. So I'm just showing you my notes.
Gotcha.
So Lori's on Mars, and they're talking, and what needs to happen is Lori needs to convince Manhattan that it's important that he saves humanity from itself right now, because they're about to go to war, and he could just make it all go away. And right now he's tired of humanity. They're blaming him for cancer and everything like that, so he's trying to free himself.
And he sees a lot bigger picture than what the people see, right?
Exactly.
He's thinking like,
so he keeps telling her,
after you guys kill each other and everybody suffers for 30, 50, 100 years, then society ends up being really good or something like that. Like he sees the grand
even
scheme.
Bigger than that. He's like, if all of humanity is gone, it won't even register on the galactic scale of what's going on.
That's true, yeah.
And and one thing that's beautiful is he ends up lifting up his castle into like a ship, and they're flying around Mars, and he's showing her Mars. And he's like, look at these there's all kinds of facts about Mars I didn't know. They were pretty amazing. But he's like, look at this volcano. It's the size of Montana. Isn't that gorgeous? Stuff like that. He's like, yeah, but there are people that are being hurt and stuff like that. So from Manhattan's side right now, he's trying to explain how wonderful the galaxy is and how pitiful mankind is, that it's not really needed.
But he still doesn't understand human emotions.
He forgot them all, So he's not getting that. Now, the impactful side of this conversation is Lori. Lori's trying to explain to him, like, look, because now we're getting her point of view. Everybody's got their own stories, right? So this is Lori's. We're learning that, I tried hard. My mom, she was an adventurer, which is a lot of times what they call themselves, not heroes, adventurers.
Yeah.
Which is so Venture Brothers.
Yeah.
And so I followed in her footsteps. And there was this time I used to like the comedian, but then I found out the truth, yada, yada, yada. So the story's going on. And what's beautiful is as it's going on, she's starting to realize that there's a reason that the comedian had said certain things and that the mom, blah, 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 blah. What it is the comedian ended up being her dad. After the rape attempt, the mom went back to him. And so that's why she never
always kind of defended him a little bit.
She could never truly hate him. And I think the movie's the only one that does this part. At the end, she's like, the reason I could never hate him is because he gave me you.
Mm-hmm.
So she ended up going back to him. And it's this kind of thing where it clicks in Manhattan and it clicks in the reader as well, because it's like, holy cow. So Manhattan stops and he says, there are no miracles. I don't believe in miracles, is what he says. But then at the end of her realization, and she ends up like shattering his castle and stuff like that in this moment. It's a beautiful moment. And he stops. He's like, there are miracles. Because of all the random, and he does such a better job than me, but there's all the random, atoms in the world and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Two people that hate each other, like your mom and the comedian, they get together and it has to be you that comes out. Mm-hmm. Of all the crazy atoms that have to happen to create you, you come out of such impossible situations. There's a person like you. And so she is the miracle, just like, but she's saying like, everybody's like that. Mm-hmm. And he says, exactly. Earth is full of miracles. It's worth saving. And
that's crazy.
Oh, it's so good. That chapter right there, I think could be pulled out and given to anybody who needs to know if this book is good or not. Because it's just the way it's written.
Just that conversation between the two of them pretty much.
It's just that. And it's so wonderful. The visuals, of course, are great. I learned a lot about Mars. It's pretty amazing. There is actually a smiley face on Mars. I didn't know that. I ended up looking that up afterwards.
Really?
Yeah. Because there's like, at the end, you see like the smiley face on Mars as they're pulling out. And I'm like, wait a minute, he was just showing facts about Mars. Did he make that smiley face? No, that actually exists on Mars. It's pretty neat.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, really impactful story, or a chapter where we kind of get we see that Manhattan's coming back to save humanity, even though everybody thinks he's causing cancer. Mm-hmm. And Lori now knows the truth about her father. So we get into chapter 10. We only have 2 more to go. Things are getting really heated. The world is preparing for war. Nixon's ready to go. We're DEFCON 1. Dan and Rorschach are hidden in Archie. They're kind of like just trying to like stay away from the police. Mm-hmm. They continue to research who's behind the mystery that's like killing off all these heroes. Let's see. And then we see that Ozzy is setting up like all these TVs. He has like this Antarctic base and he's setting up this wall of TVs and we don't know really what's going on there. Dan and Rorschach, they learn that the comedian, he just knew too much is why he was killed, which is kind of what we got when we found out that he went to go cry to Moloch. Yeah. So we knew that we kind of like, okay, there's this island he knows about. Somebody wants him dead for that. So now the characters are caught up with the readers. Rorschach and Dan find out. So they end up going to this pyramid corporation or whatever, and they end up like doing some research. And Rorschach and Dan, they end up finding out that Ozzy's behind everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one of the heroes.
Wow.
And Rorschach has been sending, and there's a little side note I want to make sure to mention. They're going to go confront him at his Antarctic base now. But beforehand, we make sure it's the final point where these journals, that he's been sending them to the newspaper. And the newspaper just kind of throws them in a pile. They call it the crank pile. Yeah. It's a pile of like whatever nonsense stories.
All the crazy people's letters.
Exactly. And so I'm just checking the time. We're at 43 minutes in talking about Watchmen. It's such a good one. So that's that. They go to the Antarctic base. In chapter 11, we see that we see how Ozzy's life, how he grew up. And it's funny because everybody else is like much more personal stories. Ozzy's life, he starts off with saying like, yeah, my parents died early. I thought I was dumb. Or everybody says I'm smart, but I didn't think I was smart. And then he talks about Alexander more. Alexander the Great, he like modeled his life out of Alexander and yada, yada, yada. And he really worships him. Mm-hmm. And then as they show up, so Dan and Rorschach get there finally. A really cool adventure as they get there. And they attack Ozzy, but Ozzy quickly beats the hell out of him. He's just so much smarter than them. He might be also with superpowers because he is very quick. We learn later on that
he also has a lot of technology, though, right?
He has a lot of technology, yeah. And he's been working with Manhattan to develop a lot of technology, so he kind of has that going for him.
He's the one
too.
with more like Stark tech than the other guys.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, so then Ozzy reveals that he learned from the comedian that the rules are gray and the world needed saving. So back when they had that meeting, remember in the funeral when he was looking back to when they had the meeting, and the comedian burned that map saying it's all going to be gone.
Yeah.
Ozzy was the only one that was really paying attention to that situation because he was saying like, you'll be the smartest person of Cinders.
Yeah.
And Ozzy was like, I have to do something to save this planet. I can't worry about this piddly stuff anymore. So that's when Ozzy started his master plan. And so his grand plan was this. He made this island. He put all these artists and everything on there. He told them they're going to be making this big movie special effects thing. Yeah. And what it was this like Cthulhu-like giant alien-looking monster with tentacles and everything like that. Now, I'm a little shady on the details, but apparently he was going to blow up as well. Like he put like a psychic's brain in there and stuff like that. It was going to blow up. He was going to teleport that into the middle of New York City, and then it would kill a bunch of people with this explosion when it came in. And I'm not sure if it's going to be an alien attack or a different dimensions alien attack. We're going to call it alien. Yeah. It's going to come in and it's going to destroy half the city. Yeah. Every country in the world will see that and like, holy shit, aliens are real and they're coming for us. We got to stop the war and be prepared for this alien thing.
Everybody will band together to fight a common enemy.
Yeah. And so that people, and then Dan and Rorschach are like, that's impossible to kill a bunch of people and stuff like that. You'll never this plan will never work. And he says, the plan will work. It started 35 minutes ago. Oh, wow. They got there too late. The monster's already there. He already destroyed half of New York.
Wow.
Yeah. So then And then in New York, it's in ruins. And Manhattan and Laurie show up and see like the devastation. And Manhattan and Rory are now upset. And Manhattan feels like this is his fault. He couldn't see this part because of the monster itself. Like in teleportation, it had like, I think it was tachyon particles. It was messing up his... Tachyon, thank you. Star Trek. Yep. And it messed up his thing. So he couldn't see this far into the future. And so then they go to to Ozzy's base. And Laurie and Manhattan, or Ozzy's, they approach Ozzy, and he ends up vaporizing Manhattan in this like X-ray machine thing. I think it was actually the teleportation machine. And then Laurie shoots Ozzy, but he catches the bullet. So that's why I think he might have super speed. Yeah. Because he catches it with like 2 fingers and it's like really cool. So Manhattan eventually he reforms outside as a giant, and he's telling him like that's the first trick I learned was how to reform because earlier when he was
that's how he created himself. Yeah.
So he's about to be destroyed by a giant Manhattan, and then Ozzy like turns on all the TVs, and dude, it's so freaking heartbreaking. All the TVs are news stations with President Nixon on there, explaining that. Us and the Russians are now working together. We are afraid of this threat, this alien threat. The world is now at peace. We've signed the peace treaty. We will make sure to be prepared for this alien threat and stuff like that. And 3 million people had died, but everybody's united. And Ozzy's plan worked. And so he explains that you guys can't expose me because then this goes away. Yeah. And what goes from 3 million people is dead to the world is dead. Yeah. And it's just like, it's crazy, I'm kind of going off of my notes now because it's just...
Like, couldn't you made a plan, though, that doesn't kill so many people? Just show an alien ship or something like that and launch a rocket into the ocean or something. Right. Blow up a volcano somewhere.
Laurie and Dan agree that they can't do anything about it. Like they're kind of both those characters that are like, we're humans in a god world right now, so they can't do anything about it. Manhattan understands the logic behind it, says, yeah, that was probably the right way to go. I'm not happy about it. I think he even says, like, I don't agree with the methods or something like that, but I'm not happy
But it's pretty smart, pretty effective.
Yeah. Rorschach says, bullshit, everybody needs to know. And starts walking out to tell everybody. And it's so sad because then...
don't expose him, just go ahead and kill him quietly in the back.
Well, Manhattan understands it. No, we can't let you go tell everybody. It'll ruin everything. So Manhattan goes outside and Rorschach, he even takes off his face, is what he calls it, his mask, because that's his real face. Yeah. He takes off his face and he says, I got to tell him. And he says, you can't, he says, then you need to do it. You need to take me out because I'm going to go tell him. And so he's like yelling at him like, kill me. And finally Manhattan just vaporizes him into pieces and he's dead. So Rorschach was killed.
Are you sure he's dead though, or did he teleport him?
No. He is very dead. Yeah. Because it's like, he doesn't vaporize him. He
atomizes him.
Yeah, but blood and guts are left behind.
Gotcha. Yeah. Pink mist.
So Dan and Laurie, they get together now and they're finally going to be happy. Manhattan is happy about it. We do see him kind of walk up on them like sleeping together. Manhattan decides to leave this galaxy for a simpler one, he says, possibly create his own life. So he's going to go off and try to do his own thing. Nice. Which I think is going to lead into Doomsday Clock. I haven't read much of any of the Doomsday Clock stuff yet, but I think that's going to be what happens. Nice. And then so now we're kind of like, everything's good. Now we're past this event. In hiding, we see that Laurie and Dan have changed their looks and their lives. Now they're going to be Mr. and Mrs. Hollis, which is the name of the very first Night Owl and kind of honor of him. Nice. And then the final scene of the comic book, which is so freaking good scene, we see that the newspaper doesn't have anything to write because everybody's at peace. So he says, well, pull something out of the crank file. And the junior guy gets Rorschach's journals. Oh, man. Which reveals everything. So we don't know how well his piece is going to go. That's it, guys. That's Watchmen. Okay, the comic book. I can't urge you guys to read this enough. I never read it before. I never knew how good it was, and it shook me. I mean, it's been in my brain for the last couple of weeks now because I've read this thing, and now I've been reading a bunch of stuff on it. So
the show that's coming out, is it going to start that story over from the beginning? Or
it's like 20, 30 years after that.
Oh, so after those files start to get published in the news.
There is a cult that are all like Rorschach fanatics. So they might believe like, oh, Rorschach was the truth, and everybody else just put it like, oh, he's a nut job, and these are all fake. But there might be a cult that believes it's real, and they're like out to kill, Ozzy or whatever.
Yeah.
So let me kind of break down what wasn't in there. So we didn't have the Black Freighter. I didn't talk about the Black Freighter comics.
Yeah.
This was a comic book within this comic book series that was about this man who was in a shipwreck. He thinks that there's going to be this basically ghost ship going to go for his town. So he's trying to struggle to get back to his town to warn everybody. Mm-hmm. When in the process of getting there, I mean, it is gross. He's like makes his raft out of the dead bodies of his crewmen because they're buoyant. And then while they're going, he's attacked by sharks, and then he kills one of the sharks and makes like kind of like is living on the shark too. And it's just a terrible situation. He's eating raw seagulls and stuff like that.
Don't dead bodies eventually sink?
These ones don't. These ones are great. I don't know. I think what it is too, he actually talks about like they're inflating them full of gas. And so he's using that. Yeah, it's really good.
That's tight.
Yeah. So it finally gets to his hometown, and he's like, I'm too late. I took too long. They're already attacked by the dead. So he's thinking there's like a lot of demons or whatever, spirits that are around. So he's sitting there, and like this couple comes up, and he's like, oh, this is the merchant that I know from town. How did he escape the demon's path? He must be working with them. I have to kill him. So he kills these two, and he gets into town, and he finds his family. He thinks there's a demon in there. He ends up killing this woman that's in there, and it ends up being his wife.
Oh, man.
And his children are like, Dad, what's going on? And the mom's like, dear, while she's bleeding out. The town's freaking out because, oh my God, we just found these two dead bodies too. What's going on? And there's this killer in town, and it's this pirate and this captain. So then he escapes, and he's realizing that I'm the demon that was coming in, and I have to. And he sees, but then when he gets out there, he sees the ship that's out there, and it was just standing there waiting for him. So then he just starts swimming out to the ship, and he goes up there to join the crew. And so that story within a story is supposed to be representing Ozzy. And this whole situation of like, I have to be the demon to stop the the problem. I don't like it. I think it breaks up the story too much. And in the movie, it's very bad.
It's not a very good image, a very good, not foreshadowing, but mirroring of the story.
Personally, I think it's not too good. But people that are like, like when this is like your favorite thing in the world, there are people that are like Game of Thrones about this. They will worship this comic within a comic. So I feel like I'm also not getting it as well as they do. So I just want to kind of throw that out there. It's okay. But yeah, so let's talk about we'll go briefly over the movie and the TV show we got coming up, and then we'll go over some regular news. Mm-hmm. But the last bit of Comic Book Club, the movie that came out of this came out in 2009. Some of the pros is it was Zack Snyder. I think he did an excellent job in this. He did a lot of these like slow motion moments that were really cool. The opening scene is fantastic.
With the comedian dying or flying out the window.
Well, I think it's even before that, or maybe it is after that. It's the credits where it shows like the passage of time, where they keep taking like pictures together, and so you see like the passage of time.
Oh yeah.
But it shows like these like old Adam West era Batmans that are kind of in there. We see it has really great soundtrack. It's the most accurate thing ever in a comic book adaptation because Zack Snyder took the pages from the comic books and cut them out and used them as a storyboard for the movie.
That's cool.
Yeah. So many spots of the movie are not only like the exact image that you see in the comic book.
Yeah.
Like you're like, that whole conversation was word for word out of the comic book.
That's cool.
It's a trip to the point where somebody brought this up online. When the mobsters are trying to kill Rorschach in jail, they're in the movie, they're using this like big saw to like cut through the bars. Mm-hmm. But in the comic book, they're using a torch. Yeah. And the guy that's trying to get in there to kill him is like, I can't wait to smell your flesh burning or something, or cooking your flesh or whatever. Yeah. In the movie, they say the same thing, but they're using the saw. They're not using the, so it's kind of like.
They just want to copy the script exactly.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting. There's extras, of course, but yeah, the CGI is top notch. I mean, all the Manhattan effects are fantastic.
Yeah.
The big change is, some of the cons, the big change that I don't like is instead of this like monster, which I think probably wouldn't look as good, wouldn't make as much sense.
Yeah.
They just made it to where Ozzy's using the technology to like mimic Manhattan's power signatures. And he put a bunch of bombs off in New York and Hong Kong and stuff like that, killed a bunch of people, 15 million in the movie, using an ability that looked like Manhattan's ability.
Yeah.
So now Russia and US are teaming together to stop Manhattan.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's not as cool.
Yeah.
Because then it's like Manhattan can't come back. he can't be a hero ever again.
Yeah, now he's the alien threat that they're trying to destroy.
Exactly. And I don't, I'm not a big fan of that. Let's see. A lot of the characters are, the biggest problem too, I'll just say my biggest negative is from the movies, is everybody has superpowers. And they're not supposed to have superpowers. They're really good fighters. But yeah, the budget for this movie was $130 million and made $185 million. Not good. That's worldwide. Yeah. That's really not good. Some of the good actors that we had in it, Jackie Earle Haley, he played Rorschach. Interesting fact about him, he was the only actor that actually read the books beforehand. And when he heard that Watchmen was being made in the movie, he pled to be Rorschach. He actually went to the
like, I gotta be this guy.
Studios. He's like, I gotta be Rorschach, and he's an excellent casting. Everybody in the casting is really good. Jeffrey Dean Morgan plays the comedian. He's Negan in Walking Dead. Patrick Wilson, he's the one that plays Dan. We also have Malin Ackerman. She plays Lori, and then the last one that's of note is Matthew Good plays Adrian Veidt or Ozzy. So it's a really good cast. Some interesting trivia from this. We have all the U.S. flags, I mentioned this before, have 51 stars is because in the storyline we took over Vietnam. In the opening scenes, we see the original Night Owl like punching some guy in a alleyway, and in the posters are actual Batman posters.
Nice.
What we see on the other side is a rich man and wife being saved. So it's believed that it was Zack Snyder saying he stopped the Waynes from being killed. So there was no need for Batman in this universe.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it was kind of like, there's a Zack Snyder special little teaser in there, especially since later on Zack Snyder would make Batman movies. It was pretty interesting. And then, the last little bit I mentioned before is that he used the actual comic book as storyboards, which is revolutionary. I wish people would do it more often.
Right.
What's premiering today is going to be the Watchmen television show. It's on HBO. It's going to be written by Damon Lindelof. Ooh, that's a name for sure. He's a writer on Lost, not great, but he also wrote the new Star Treks. That's good.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
It's got a really good cast in it. Notably is Don Johnson. He's playing a character named Judd Crawford. While we don't know who that is, because this is going to be taking place 20 or 30 years in the future, right? From the comic books, not the movie. We don't know who Judd Crawford is, but man, that guy looks like he should be playing a Dan. So I'm hoping he comes out to be Dan with a new name. Nice. Some other notable characters that we know from the comic books. Jeremy Irons is playing Adrian Veidt, so he's probably going to be Ozzy, the guy that ended up having the master plan. And Jeremy Irons is Scar, and he's in Die Hard 3.
Yeah, so these guys are going to be well-aged, so these could easily be the original characters 30 years down the road, right?
Jeremy Irons is playing Veidt, so he's...
Oh, yeah. He's like 60, 70 years old.
Adrian Veidt. Yeah, so he should be the one. Okay, and then there was one more I wanted to make sure to mention... God, why can't... Oh, I must not have copied her name. Shoot. Okay. Lori is in this, and what's cool is her new name in the show is going to be Lori Blake. Really wish I didn't start that. The reason that's awesome is that's the comedian's last name.
Oh, really?
So she took the comedian's last name after finding out that that's the dad. I know, it's so messed up and fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because that whole scenario just... It reflects how screwed up humanity is, but at the same time, like they were saying, it's a miracle that we even exist the way we do with as messed up as people we are. But I don't know. It's like wasabi.
Yeah, wabi-sabi. I think it is.
That's what it is.
King of the Hill. Yeah. Okay, so that's basically it. Watchmen, I think, guys, it's the turning point in comic books before we go to mature literature. Fantastic story. If you guys haven't read it, I know this is kind of like. We picked our first comic book is possibly the most important comic book in history. So it was a biggie. And it was very deep and complex. So if you're a Watchmen fan already, you're like, well, Frank, you are missing so many things. Yeah, no doubt. It's that good. But if you're not a Watchmen fan and you're like, oh, I need a good comic book to get into, this is a good one to get into. Again, I bought it for $10 because it was a half off sale on my local comic book store. You can normally get it for $19.99. There is a reprint to that 2019 version. Do me a favor, go to your local comic book shop if you want to buy that. Don't buy it off of Amazon or like that. Go to the local comic book shop. There is a sequel they're already putting together in a binding that looks just like this, except for it has Batman on the front now. It's called Doomsday Clock. I think
has Batman on the front?
Because it's the sequel about everything tying together with the new story. We were just talking about how like...
But it's going to tie in with Batman?
So essentially, I won't get into the details because I don't know them all very well. But apparently what I think is Manhattan's the reason New 52 existed. Oh, okay. And then when they did Rebirth, it was like undoing Manhattan's mess up.
Gotcha.
And so Flash and Batman, I was reading the beginning of those, but essentially like they find out that Manhattan's been toying with everything. So it's bringing Watchmen into the current Batman world or DC world.
Okay. So if I know the show is going to come out and it's going to be a show and not a movie, but do you think they would consider making a Watchmen movie in the DC Black Label?
What's funny?
Be a good fit?
What's funny is they did, and it was Watchmen 2009. I mean, it was dark, it was gritty, it was so accurate.
Maybe we just weren't ready for it back then.
Well, I did some research on that because I was like, how did this movie do so bad? I mean, really, it didn't make enough profit to be worth it for them because they got to make a lot more than this for that money they put into it. The movies that came out in that year were like awesome. This was the 31st highest grossing movie of the year, which is awful.
Yeah.
The movies ahead of it were like Avatar. I mean, it was a really big year.
Phenomenal.
I mean, I remember now nobody watches Avatar, but in that year, I saw it 3 times. I mean, it was huge.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of big movies. One of the Transformers came out. I mean, it was like just a CGI overload.
Yeah.
And worst of all, the year before this one, which was on hot everybody's brain, was The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger's Joker and the first Iron Man. So the very first MCU movie. Real bad time to make a superhero movie because they got it. They nailed it.
You're in their shadow.
You're in their shadow the whole time. So I think this came out at the wrong time. I think if it had come out today, and take out the damn pirate stuff, please. I mean, it just slows it down. So it's like it gets to like a peak action moment. And they're like, I'm adrift on the ocean. I'm like, no.
Yeah, and we see so much stuff with heroes that have superpowers that are so much greater than any of these. So much greater than like we see Superman and stuff. That Marvel's got a whole bunch of them. X-Men especially has got just you can CGI the shit out of powers.
Yeah,
but it would be really cool to see a movie with a bunch of Batmans who don't have powers and see the realistic people trying to survive on the streets and make their crappy city a little bit safer, a little bit better.
Yeah, Dan, it's funny because Dan is such a sad sack in this. He's Night Owl.
Yeah.
And he's like fully retired and fine with it, but he's the one you relate to the most, I think, personally myself.
Yeah.
Because he's the kind of guy that's just like, yeah, I come home, I got like a cat or whatever, and I'm cool.
Yeah.
And, he visits the old Night Owl. He's just kind of like reminiscing about the good old days, but he also he mentions to the original Night Owl, I was like, oh, do you miss the good old days? Do you want to ever wear the suit again? He's like, no, I'm good, honestly. My life's fine.
Yeah.
He's not excited about it. And he finally ramps up to seeing that it's worth saving humanity. But that's what it is. It's not like,
he's not doing it for himself anymore.
And I got to make sure to avenge him. It's not about that. It's like, I wanted to help.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. Any final thoughts on Watchmen after getting the full spiel of everything?
Well, now that you explained it in so much detail, I'm like, man, I should really go rewatch the movie because it's been so long.
Yeah. I
remember the movie, but I don't remember the details of the story. And so, now I definitely want to go watch the movie before the series comes out.
There's 3 cuts, theatrical, director's, and ultimate cut. And I just watched the ultimate cut.
Yeah.
And of course, at the time I watched theatrical.
The DVD I have, I think, is the big box one that has 3.
Okay.
I think it has all 3 of those in it.
I couldn't tell you what the difference in all of them. I would watch the ultimate cut if I were you. It makes for a 3.5 hour movie.
Yeah.
About 25 or 28 of them is that pirate stuff.
Yeah.
And I just told you basically the whole story. Yeah, honestly, I think it slows down the movie itself.
Yeah.
If you're a loyalist to Watchmen, you're upset by me saying to get rid of it, but I'm telling you, you don't need it.
Yeah. I gotcha.
But yeah, and read this if you ever want to, or check out the motion comics too. The motion comics are fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting to see. All right, guys, that's it for our comic book club, our very first one. Our next one will be Flashpoint. Right? Is that a Flashpoint?
I think so. Flashpoint, yeah.
Yeah. So that'll be coming up. We'll probably be doing that mid-December.
Who's reading that one?
That's me too. I give you guys plenty of cushion.
Oh man, okay.
I knew you guys are not as much into comics as I am.
I haven't started reading mine yet.
Well, Daniel's on top of it. He's like really he got 2. He's not sure if he wants to do Hellblazer or The Long Halloween. So he's doing both right now.
Good.
I'm like, hey, props, man. We'll do 2 of them. I don't mind. I'm sure the fans won't mind. So that'll be good. If there's anything you guys think we should change about how we do Comic Book Club, this is our very first one.
Yeah.
And we went deep. I mean, we went with a big one. It won't be as much story as this one was. Clearly, this was probably about 3 times as much story as a normal comic book series that we were going to be reviewing.
Mm-hmm.
But let us know where we want to talk about these comic books. They're so important, the ones that we pick. And this one, of course, was very high on that list. But yeah, I think that's about it for Watchmen. Then we'll go into some news and then we'll head out.